Hey Sven, how you doing?
Hey Dave.
I'm all right, thank you. We continue to struggle a little bit with the podcast streaming setup. There was a slight little delay on one of our sides then, and we couldn't hear each other for 3 seconds. But we are now live and going. And I think we should start with this episode with a little bit of a recap on the podcast stuff that we talked about last week. Obviously, last week was our first attempt at a YouTube live stream and also our first attempt at an actual podcast. Um, and I think generally things went quite well. The YouTube stream got more attention than I thought it would. And I actually haven't looked at how many downloads we got on the podcast, but the podcast feed went live on, I think, Monday or Tuesday of the week after we broadcast, because it took a little time to just kind of sort out the software and stuff for that. But yeah, it's all up and running. You should be able to subscribe to the podcast in any podcast player just by searching for Swift Package Indexing. And I certainly checked it on a couple and found it on everywhere that I checked.
Great to see. So lovely to see really
nice.
Can you
Okay, now I
One
feel like
thing,
you have
and
a
with
delay?
yes, there is a delay. When I stop talking, it's a while until you start talking. But we shall persevere.
I'm not sure how we're going to manage.
Okay.
Yeah, we shall persevere. So anyway, so to start talking about the news from the Swift Package Index, actually that's where I'm going to start, because one of the tasks that I had on my plate was to sort out the podcast in putting this podcast into the actual site to promote it and make sure that people could find it, because we used to do that for the Twitter Spaces. And what that has ended up in for me is an entire rabbit hole about logos and branding of the package index and all the rest of it. So a little bit of history. The logo that I created for the Swift Package Index was made in about 20 minutes, and I think it's done us fine so far, but it is certainly not a particularly great logo. The overlapping squares were supposed to be like packages, and then obviously the Swift logo in the middle of them, because it is the Swift Package Index. So, like, it was fine, and it was definitely enough to get us launched. And it, in fact, has been fine for the last 2 years of progress. But it's never been. It's always been something that I've wanted to have another crack at, basically. And my idea initially, even before we launched the package index, was to have the Swift bird on the side of a box, like a package, right? And so I did a bit of an experimentation with creating something like that this week, and it's been okay. I'm not super happy with the results, and there are definitely some issues. We're not quite there yet, but there is a post on the package index discussion forum, which is, if you go to the package index GitHub site and then go to discussions, I think it's the top discussion there. You can see the mock-ups, or the kind of preliminary versions that I've started to work on there. They look fine, but they look a little bit dull when you actually put it into the site. So I have a pull request. It's actually not in pull request yet, but I have a branch on my machine where the logo is in the site, and it all looks a little bit dull. The other problem is we use these logos at lots of different sizes, and the current logo, we have actually 3 different versions. We have a large version, a medium version, and a small version, and they all have a slightly different size Swift bird, and they all have different numbers of boxes in the background. And they get used in various different places, like the main site or the documentation site, or the little .io badges. Those shields.io badges use the tiny size and getting a logo that also looks good at all three of those sizes is a challenge. So I'm not sure where it's going yet, but it's been interesting. I certainly think that going on to put a logo up for the podcast can use one of these, because that is a little easier. It's also not front and center on the actual site, and so I think what I might do is go down that route first, get that done, because also the podcast logo shouldn't be the exact same as the site logo. So I think that's where I'm going to go.
Right. Yeah. I mean, it's still recognizably related, right? You one together would be nice. What I really like, mentioned this in my reply, is that it looks a bit like a badge. Unique. Because the other thing is Swift. Pretty much everyone, if someone had, I would want to put a bird in a box. I think that's very unique out of that, and I think that's what you meant when you said. What did you say earlier? It bland. I think you were referring to the new version in something, and I want.
Yeah. So the new version.
We'd lose uniqueness there.
Well, I think the problem with it is that the new version is one color, whereas the old version had some brightness to the edges of the boxes, and I didn't think that would be as much of an issue as it turned out to be when I actually stuck it in the site. This is why I'm not a designer.
Right. Right. Yeah, we should. Well, maybe. I mean, that's an open issue. Maybe there's someone with more design skill who, that would be amazing.
Yeah. I mean, that discussion thread is already open. Please do feel free to comment on it. All ideas are welcome.
Great. Do I need to say over? Well, we are in bed.
There is definitely quite a significant. There is a significant delay on this audio. I have a feeling that we are already owing people an apology who are listening back to the podcast.
We need to probably need to work on that prior to the next episode. Or me traveling to a place where there's good internet. Well, okay, maybe.
I don't think it's my internet. I don't think so.
No, it's definitely mine. I was in a different place last week when we tried this new setup the first time, and the internet was good there, and I had here because it worked in the past, but this is clearly not better. So in terms of news, the other thing maybe to talk about briefly is facility to preview upcoming Doc-C features, and we're going to do that on our staging environment. For those who aren't following Swift forums, there's been a quick navigation. Sofia Rodriguez. She's implemented something that is use launch bar or other app command pop-ups. So she's added something, Doc-C viewer, where you can hit a key command. I think it's or Command Shift Open, Command Shift O. That brings up a little entry box where you can put in a simple name, matching. It'll do a simple ranking, and then you can quickly navigate a pack. Now this is something in the 5.8 branch, so in the trunk of the Swift. Yeah, it's a compiler where that's been shipped. So that's not available code unless you load in a nightly toolchain. But what we are going to do is, in order for people to try out how that works, is going to package documentation with the preview toolchain on, so that we can, we in the community can test this feature. There's also already a package up where people can test this. This is something on her GitHub page, and we'll just add a link to the show notes where you can have a look. I think we'll have this by the next time we record. So we should have this up fairly soon, so people can have a look. We won't be doing this for all packages on staging. Also need to build them, and doing our whole build system twice for both production and staging is a bit heavy on our poor little box. But we'll pick a set of packages, and we probably, Dave, we haven't discussed. I imagine there'll be like a small package list where we list like maybe a dozen or a couple dozen packages that we would build on. Maybe we can source this, be an issue or something to figure out to onboard this mechanism.
Yeah, I think that's a great idea. Yeah, it's a good idea, and I must admit I'm really excited about this feature. I think one of the primary things that we've heard is in hosting this documentation, we've heard from people about Doxy documentation. We've heard quite a lot of feedback, and the primary thing is search. And so it's a great step forward from Sophia. And yeah, I'm looking forward to both testing it out on the staging site and also getting it into production when 5.8 comes around.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I've started using our hosted docs quite a bit when working. I'm just excited every time I see a package that has a link up, or a couple of times I saw people had documentation but didn't actually, and I submitted a little because it's so easy. The SPI YAML file to the project, and if people are interested to just merge, it's always in the same place. I just love using it myself, and I think that's really going to be a great feature to have an easier time, So yeah, looking forward to that one.
One thing it doesn't do is one request that we've had is for documentation to be included in package search. And certainly the idea of full text documentation search in the package index is not something that I'm particularly thinking that we should tackle straight away. But one thing which we have discussed around bringing in, so when you generate documentation, you can pass a flag called emit digest, and what that does is it outputs all of the method names, type names, all of the symbol names basically from the documentation, which is effectively everything in the package, because I believe even undocumented ones get emitted in that output. And we could, for a couple of different reasons, use that data on the server. So if at some point we added the mechanism to grab that digest out of the process of generating the documentation and uploading that back to the package index server, then we could potentially include package search results by method and symbol in our search results. But I'm not sure I would want to go the extra step and start doing full text of documentation search. Although maybe we will one day. Who knows? This is a project which has, in my opinion, a bright future ahead of it. There's lots of work to do, and who knows whether we will one day do full text search within package documentation. We could do.
Yeah, I mean, it feature. I do wonder how much we could even just let search engines lift that, depending on what people. I'm not sure what the need would be to do a cross-site search, right? Because normally I would search for stuff in packages that I'm where to start looking. I wonder what the use case is to.
Yeah, I think the use case is so let's say you're looking for a package to do networking, right? And I know I always pick that example because I don't know, it's just the one that first comes into my head every time I think about it. But let's say you're trying to look for a networking package. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. But let's consider you're looking for some kind of network package. if the package is badly named, then some of the symbols inside it may throw up results that would still be relevant, and might get you packages that you might not otherwise have found from purely the package name and package description. Networking is a truly bad example there, because because if you're writing a networking package and you don't put the word networking in your package description, you're doing it wrong. But there, I'm sure there are situations that would be my use case for including symbols in search results.
Right. Yeah. All right. News-wise, do we have anything?
No, I think, well, the only thing would be a very slight follow-up on we mentioned last time that we were having some stability issues with one of the Mac build machines, and just to say that the good news is that that is fixed. It was actually it seemed maybe like it was a location problem within our hosting provider. So we eventually had them physically move that Mac Mini machine into a different rack, and that was it. It all started working again. And not only did the stability problems get fixed, there was an issue with not being able to log in and out of Ventura users. It would hang whenever you logged out of a Ventura user. That was also fixed by moving it physically into a different rack. So it must have been having real problems with where it was living. The interesting bit is that machine has been stable as anything right up until the point that we put Ventura on it. And so it didn't feel like a hardware problem for all the time that we were trying to figure out what the actual issue with it was, but it must have just been a coincidence. So I'm very happy to have that back up and running.
Yeah, it's I guess the machine, just like me, having network trouble in different to move a bit.
Yes, exactly.
Although for me, it's the other way around. It got worse.
Yeah, exactly. So I do have a feeling, though, that there is still a rogue package, and it's not something I've looked into this week, because that machine is rebooting itself quite regularly, and I have a feeling that a package during the build system is causing a reboot. And I think I know which package it is, but I haven't spent the time to narrow that down yet, because that's actually not causing any major problems, because it is catching up with all the processing. But I have a feeling there's something still a little bit of a problem there, but nothing urgent.
Right. Package, not willing to name it yet on air.
Not willing to name it yet. No, I don't want to. I don't want to throw the accusation at anyone just yet until I've looked at it a little further.
All right. Some packages, or we don't have a quiz this week, do we? I don't. Anything to
I
quiz
also
on?
don't have a quiz. I have no quiz this week. So yes, we should look at some packages, and let me switch over the browser window here.
Looking at the stream, it says episode 14. It is. Be confused. You're looking at the right stream.
I can fix that live. I can fix that. I should be able to fix that. Oh, there we go. I can fix that live. There we go. All right. So I'll start first with this package. It's called Atlantis, and it had a release recently, and it's actually from Proxyman, who, if you haven't used Proxyman, it's a fantastic tool for inspecting network traffic between your application and whatever server you are sending and receiving traffic from. And of course, because it's installed locally in your application, it doesn't need you to have to sort out HTTP proxies, doesn't need trust certificates, it doesn't need anything like that. And what it allows you to do is just install this package into your application, run the Proxyman app, and you'll get very detailed really good quality. I mean, I've used Proxyman for a while now, and it is a fantastic app for inspecting network requests. So I think the fact that I'm actually not sure what the release was. Let's see what the release notes say. It was a bug fix release, but it did pop it to the front of my mind, because I would definitely recommend both this package and this tool.
Right, but this does, as usual, involve you like an intermediate certificate and stuff too.
No, it doesn't. No. So
okay.
The package is in. So if you can use Proxyman without a package, and then you have to set up the intermediate certificate so that it can inspect all the traffic that way. But if you would prefer not to install that certificate, which I certainly do, you can instead install this package, not have to do any of that stuff, and just use this package to report the data directly to Proxyman.
Right, so it does that before, as part of the app's networking stack. It routes the data out to the viewer in parallel, effectively.
Yeah, exactly.
That's interesting. That's really nice. Yeah.
So yeah, that's like there's nothing wrong with installing the root certificates and doing a proxy or whatever. Charles Proxy is the one that was top of the heap for a long time, and there's no problem with doing any of that stuff. But certainly, I think this is a nicer way to not have to worry about any of those things.
Well, I mean, I suppose it's just easier if
I believe
a new device.
Oh, sorry.
Sorry, the delay kicking in. It's just easier if you just want to quickly test something. You can just go off, do your thing, without having to go through, the thing of setting it up. You want to actually also remove it again afterwards, and that just sounds like it's easier.
Yes.
To get started.
I should mention that Proxyman is a paid application, and although actually I've just been to the website and there is a Black Friday sale, so maybe if you haven't got it, then that's maybe an opportunity. All right, so I don't have your packages up here today, so let me whenever you say your first package, I will type it into the search box and we'll see if I can find it.
Oh, excellent. We demo the search. Is Swift tagged, Swift-tagged. I'm sorry to say again, but I'm not sorry. It's it's Point Free Co. It's a team that I mentioned frequently when it comes to packages. They had a new release of this pack. Did you find it? There you go. Swift tagged.
I did. It's up on screen. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, there's a release, and it's just a very useful package. And the to give you safe variants of string into your ID any type. And the use case is, for instance, if you have a struct that has an int and you pass that around, and when you pass it around, it's just an int. You don't really know whether it's an identifier for that. And it's just could be plugged in. What tagged allows you to do is attach a type. So let's say it's a user ID. You can struct type to that int, and they're sort of packaged together, and then you can't put any random int into a user ID int. It always has to come with that strict type. So you can't accidentally call an API with the wrong ID type. It gives you the ability to namespace any type with an additional type info. And an example where we actually use this is in our nightly job, where we we look and check if packages have new dependencies. And we have two types of URLs in there. One is the package URL, and the other is the URL to a manifest Swift file. And when I wrote this, I always got confused with what I was dealing with. I sometimes ended up accidentally looking at manifest, but by tagging it, you could, the compiler would just tell you which it is. Plug a package URL into a parameter, and it's super useful for stuff like that. And other than that, you really work with it like with the underlying type. It's equatable. It's equatable if it's comparable. It retains. It has all these conformances. It's very easy to use, and the README has more examples on how you could use this. There's so-called phantom to give you additional namespaces if you run out, and there's other little tricks how you can use it. Great package, highly recommended it. Have needs for that.
So I haven't, I haven't used this or even seen it before, but as I understand it from a very quick browse of the README and from what you just said, it's effectively you can just tie these two pieces of information together. So if you have a user, so one of the examples in the README is if user type, and that user could be identified either by, for example, an int if it was a database ID, or a string by the email address. You can kind of tie all those things together and say, here is just a user tagged by this integer or a user tagged by the string, and it will always know what the underlying type is. Is that a fair representation?
And say it's the string and the ID tagged by the type. Around identifier is just an example.
Right. Okay.
But the point is that you can have two different types of int. You normally couldn't, right? If you have an int and if you use, for example, you could think, well, like yes, but the type alias doesn't actually give you. If you type alias, for example, string to foo, you can still plug a string into any place where it's used. The compiler wouldn't stop you. But if you tag foo, tagged foo, string, don't just plug a string in that. It always has to be a foo plugin. So that's the advantage of using these basic types.
Interesting.
I think this is a case where reading with it the README is great because they go through the motivation and give examples. Been in the situation where you had a type and you wished apart somehow, or have the compiler help you tell them apart, immediately. And in that case.
There we go.
So there you go. Swift.
That's great.
Over.
My next one is not one that I have any experience with at all, but it definitely it had a version 4 release 3 days ago, and it definitely caught my attention. So I'm not sure what the version 4 actually has because there are no release notes for this at all, but surely a version 4 of anything must be newsworthy, right? It's called Satin, and it's by High Res Inc., and it is a 3D graphics framework built on Apple's Metal framework. I know very little about 3D graphics, but certainly if I were looking for a Metal-based 3D engine, I would want to at least give this one a try. Lots of nice images in the README that have been generated with the engine. And while I'm not quite sure from the README, it doesn't give me an enormous amount of information about how far this engine goes. My gut feeling is that it's fairly low level still, although it might be a nice step on top of Metal, because Metal is certainly very low level. But certainly it struck me as something worth checking out if you have any interest in 3D graphics and Metal.
Great. Yeah, I'd seen that, but I have just absolutely no experience with Metal or any.
Yeah, me too.
Graphics frameworks. I did some. I played around a bit with Sprite, which is not the same thing at all, but it looked really interesting. Of the name.
Yeah, I've done a couple of bits with Sprite Kit, and I've also had a little play with the Unreal Engine, which is a hugely capable 3D engine, which is not low level at all. I mean, you can get into the low level bits of it, but generally both Unreal and what's the other one, Unity, are quite high level. So they come with modeling tools and they come with all sorts of stuff like super high level. And it's definitely not at that level. I would put it more towards the low level side of things than the high level side of things. The only other experience of 3D has actually been this week, which you may not know this, but the logo that we talked about earlier, which I designed this week, or the new potential logo, was built in Blender, which is a 3D tool, not a 3D engine. But so 3D has been on my mind this week, which is maybe why this caught my eye, and I thought, well, let's talk about that.
Nice. Yeah, I did notice that the logo preview has a nice 3D. It's 3D. That makes sense. It's
It is,
Blender.
and do you know the reason I use do you know the reason I use Blender to make that logo is because even just for the single color, not no shading, no rendering, nothing like that. I just wanted something else to get the angles of all the lines right.
Right.
So that was why that's why I started with doing it in Blender. Anyway, so that's my second package. How about your second one, Sven?
My second one is called Launch at Modern. So it's -modern. Did you find it? Launch.
I am failing to find it. Oh, launch login. There we go. I got it.
Yeah. So this is. Oh, I also want to mention this briefly. If you click on the go through to the overview. Login -modern.
I must admit, I don't
second
see
page.
that package. Oh, there it is. No, it's got the same. It's got the same package name. That's interesting. So it's got the same package name, but a different repository name, which is why I missed it.
Oh, okay, interesting. Yes. So there have been some changes in macros material with respect to launch at login. There's the new stuff being settings, and I think there's a new API. Well, there must be a new API. That's why the author made to deal with it. So this is if you have a macOS app. This is an easy way to give you something in settings. There's UI. It's a Swift UI view that you can plug into your settings. This toggle and handles everything under the hood. It really couldn't be any simpler to add a toggle to your settings screen. Way to go now. People aren't expected to drag the app in anymore. That's how I always did it, but I actually when people at some point asked they want a toggle in their settings, and I thought that's interesting, and I realized that actually doing it these days, and that's a very easy way to do it. On older macOS versions, this is what the other pack non-modern one, which I guess handles all the, but presumably gives you the same UI for this. So there you go. Launch it.
So the new login system with Ventura, I actually really like it. I think it's a great step forward to finally be able to have just one place where all of this stuff is listed, and you don't need third-party applications to look in all the different places. This is where it is now. I think that's a great step forward. My only question with this package would be, how does this package manifest this functionality when it's running on. Well, I know the requirements for this package are 13, so I guess you just have to either implement it in the completely different way by using the other package on 12 if you still support it, or you just don't have this feature on 12, right?
Yeah, that's what you would have to do. I mean, you're facing use any packages, right? You'd have to. I'm not sure if there's.
Sure.
Use them. I think they would still. You could probably just use the Ventura, which would show it in the launch items. But I suppose there's something additional. I have to admit, I haven't looked into the because my app goes back to, I think, macOS, and so I'm certainly not using.
Right.
But yeah, also I do like the new stuff in Ventura's settings. Although I am a bit confused what the set of items is. You have the launch items, which is that get launched, but there's also a services section.
Yes.
For those where you can switch off, and it says apps might do stuff in the background. This is the strings to label. Probably apparently pulled from the developer certificates or something. Very hard to map what app an entry belongs to. Are you looking at it now?
Well,
it's quite bizarre.
No, I'm not looking at it now because I have the browser up, but I know exactly that screen because I've also been looking at that screen recently. And my one feature request was going to be on each of those items in the second list. I would love to be able to say, hit a button or right click and say reveal in Finder to show me what app each of those settings was related to. I'm probably sure, I'm sure that they will probably address that at some point in a future point release, but certainly that was my biggest request for that area of the Ventura feature.
Does seem to be app specific because I have two services that actually that does that. So if you click that, it shows you what the item is. Just two services out of many that actually have it. So
interesting. I'll have to look more carefully. Yeah, exactly.
There you go. So that's
great. Well, I think I'm going to talk about one final package. I'm not going to talk about the package so much, but something that's interesting that's happened around this package in the last couple of weeks. So the package itself, I would recommend. It is called Xcodes, and it's by Robots and Pencils. And this is one package of a two-part set. So this Xcodes package is a command line tool to download versions of Xcode from Apple. So it can also help you set a default version of Xcode, and it does various other things. But its main purpose is to download and unarchive and put into the right place on your system a different version of Xcode. So you can, if you have multiple versions of Xcode, it will manage that for you. It does a consistent naming schema for the various different versions. It's a Xcode hyphen and then the semantic version of the version of Xcode. It's great. It's a lovely package. And then there is a graphical application that's built on top of this, also called Xcodes, which is an even nicer interface to this underlying command line tool, and it will help you manage various different versions of Xcode. We use it extensively, actually, on the build machines for the package index because we need lots of different versions of Xcode installed on all the different machines, and so we use that to help us manage it. The reason I'm talking about it is there have been two updates within quick succession to both of these tools. The first one, I was so happy to hear that finally it said you no longer need to log in to your developer account to download different versions of Xcode. That has been something that's been in place for a very long time, that if you want to download the direct version of Xcode, not from the App Store, but if you want to download it from the developer site, you need to log in with your developer account to grab the zip file. And so the first one was great news. Here's this new version that doesn't need you to do that anymore. And then a week later, another version that said Apple have changed it back, and you now do need to log in again. So I was sad to hear that. I'm sure there's a great reason for it. So unfortunately, it was a very brief celebration of not having to log in every time you need a new version of Xcode.
It was a good week. It's a use a lot, and as we've discussed, my internet isn't great. This is the most reliable way to actually download Xcode versions for me, because it that you can just let it sit there, and it's you'll have it the next morning. It's just great. I love it.
Yeah. You can even if you cancel the download halfway through, and then the next day come back and try and download the same version, it will resume from where you got left off, and it's great. I have no hesitation in recommending the tool or the package.
Yeah, definitely. Right. Shall I do?
Do you have a final third one? Yeah.
I do indeed. I have called Wolf Lorem by Wolf McNally. And the name might give it away. It's a package for placeholder data. I'll let you. So what this does, I mean, I think that's very easy to explain. Often when you develop an app or a service, you need placeholder data. You might need names, you might need texts, and if some text that gets pasted into design mockup. But this is more than just text. I mean, it has text, it has, account that you need. You can just get paragraphs. Also get names, first names, last name, phone numbers, emails. It's just a lot of stuff. The only thing the package probably would benefit from would be a list of it has it. It doesn't have a documentation in its README. We can help as a package index, because this is a package you can playground and download, and then if you type, you get a pop-up with all of the types it supports, and it's self-explanatory, all the things that it does have. If you need names, adjectives, anything, it's like list is really extensive. Package and see.
That's great.
And that's McNally.
I'm not sure I have much to add to that, because it is a fairly straightforward package, but I can definitely see the use of it. So I think we should wrap it up there. We're back on.
Oops, sorry.
It's okay. Well, so actually, what I was just about to say was, please do bear with us. I know today's recording has not been the smoothest piece of audio you will listen to this week. We are still kind of getting this under control and getting this into something that we can actually do with some level. We're not looking to be a hugely slickly produced podcast. There's no question that we're definitely not working for what's the radio station in the States that does all the podcasts?
NPR?
What's it called? NPR, that's right. We're definitely not trying to be NPR, as I just proved in the last 30 seconds. But we are trying to, we are getting better, and we will continue to get better at it. We will hopefully sort out the network connection issue, so there's no lag between Sven and myself. And yeah, bear with us is all I'd say. What I do have some good news on, though, is that we're back on. Last week's episode was a little bit long. We try to keep these to 45 minutes, and we're back perfectly on 45 minutes. So I suggest we call it a day right there. And I will say that we'll speak to you in a couple of weeks. And it's been good to talk packages again.
All right. Thank you. See you next time. Bye-bye.